Welcome to the Celebrity Estates Wills of the Rich and Famous podcast. In this podcast, we break down high-profile celebrity estate planning cases for advisors and their clients. Most celebrity estate catastrophes are based on the same issues that everyday people face, just with the volume turned up. Our goal is to identify and extract the individual estate planning issues that lie at the heart of each story. We then discuss what advisors should expect and how to avoid common pitfalls. Hosted by WealthManagement.com Senior Editor David Lenok.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Celebrity Estates, Wills of the Rich and Famous. My name is David Lenok. I'm a Senior Editor at WealthManagement.com and a licensed attorney, and I'll be your host. For anyone new to the podcast, in each installment, myself and a guest take on a different celebrity estate, an attempt to extract some key lessons that planners can apply to their more traditional clients. The idea being that celebrity estate planning catastrophes, although often ridiculous in their details, generally have at their cores very basic issues that can just as easily apply to non-famous or fabulously wealthy clients. We're once again joined today by Kelley Wolfington. Kelley is a senior wealth strategist at SEI Private Wealth Management, and she provides holistic advice in the areas of trust and estate planning, wealth transfer, philanthropy, succession planning, tax planning, and family communication strategies for ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals and families. Her responsibilities include collaborating with internal and external colleagues and partners to craft and deliver such advice, as well as develop strategies, techniques, tools, and materials related to these advisory areas. She helps facilitate a perpetual process to improve her clients' conditions by working with them to navigate goals, values, and visions for themselves, their families, and their communities. Thanks so much for joining us again, Kelley.
Thank you for having me again, David. I look forward to this discussion.
The last time we had Kelley on, I was just joking about this with her off mic, but we talked about Vince McMahon of the WWE, and about 2 seconds after that recording wrapped, all of the unsavory sexual allegations levied against him came out. So let's just hope that this episode's subject doesn't suffer the similar fate, and we're not dealing with some sort of Wofington celebrity estate planning curse going on here.
Fingers crossed, David.
So that subject is model actress Julia Fox. Now, don't go rushing to Google. Julia Fox is still very much alive and well. However, the Uncut Gem star recently went viral for posting a tour of her apartment for her 1.6 million TikTok followers. However, far from the expected display of over-the-top opulence that we've been conditioned to expect from that sort of thing, Fox lives in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that she characterizes as very underwhelming. It's a direct quote. In the video, she says, "I know I'm going to get roasted or whatever, but hopefully someone can watch this and think, okay, maybe I'm not doing so bad." And she goes on to explain that she's uncomfortable with excessive displays of wealth. Now, someone that grew up with shows like MTV Cribs and the whole Bravo and People magazine milieu in general, I, like many, have been largely conditioned to associate an appropriately showing living situation as basically table stakes amongst the ultra and high net worth. And even amongst the merely wealthy, a great deal of most families' wealth is tied up in their homes. But this trend is changing among the younger generations, with high net worth millennials like Julia Fox increasingly shying away from spending their money on luxury homes. Kelley, what are some of the reasons for this growing trend? And perhaps more importantly, what are the planning connotations for advisors to these clients?
Great questions, David. So when I saw Julia Fox's video and then read some of the articles afterwards, I thought it was really interesting because it is something that we are seeing. You know, what I would say in terms of one of the big reasons is millennials, they have a different value set that they look for sustainability. They look for, how can I not make an environmental impact? So I think sustainability, minimalism, we've heard those about millennials, those terms about millennials for quite some time now. I think back 10 years ago when the discussion was around the artwork or the furniture. It used to be that you'd want heavy pieces that were carried over from generation to generation. Then back then, 10 plus years ago, kids, so to speak, were looking for IKEA pieces or things that would be easy to move around, something that, that was not quite as big. And so it's actually really interesting to see, like, it's carrying forward in terms of the big houses. They no longer want those big homes. They're worried about what they're going to do to the environment. They're worried about having a large home and consuming tons of energy. And the planning connotations are pretty numerous in terms of that. When I look at some of the millennial clients that I've been working with over the past few years in terms of planning, they have a lot more philanthropy in their planning than some of the older generation. They may have children or they may be expecting children, but they also want to take care of their friends. They want to take care about the causes that they believe in. And it's usually when you're in your 20s and 30s, you don't always think about that. I used to see that more with the folks that were in their 70s and 80s and saw their kids grown.
Hmm. So I think it's important to just point out here that there's obviously a larger millennial home ownership. I don't know if I want to call it a crisis, something going on where millennials aren't able to buy homes. This is a separate but related sort of branch of that, right? Where
Yes,
they're not simply buying homes later. These are people who couldn't afford to buy homes, who
correct.
are choosing not to. These are not millennials who have master's degrees but are still working for $15 an hour.
Yes, exactly. These are the millennials that I'm speaking of are the ones that either have inherited, are going to inherit, or have created significant
Mhm.
wealth. You know, if you look at the millennial generation as a whole, what I would say is that yes, like the millennials grew up during the Great Recession. So and they have a lot of student debt. They have a lot of worries on their, as a whole, the broad generation does. But
Mm.
the millennials of the uber wealthy, so to speak, it's a little bit different. It's as a whole, I think that millennials they value experience over material goods. They do really care for what the world looks like and leaving the world a better place.
Mhm.
But the uber wealthy, or just the wealthy in general, the millennials of that class, that stature, they still believe in that.
Even though they have the means to do
Correct.
otherwise. It's interesting. So just starting with sort of a basic planning question here, I think it's not going to shock anyone that, I mean, for most of time, right, that your home and your sort of land,
Hmm.
if possible, has sort of always been sort of considered like this is the best place to put your money, the safest investment you have, the largest portion of most families' assets, the largest asset most families own. If you are a high net worth person, you have a high net worth client who is not devoting a large chunk of their assets to this, sort of easy answer almost for an advisor of like where to put your money, right?
Right.
What do you do? What are some other options for using that money, putting it to work in at least a similarly effective, safe way as having it in real estate?
Oh, a lot of our clients on the investment side, especially in that generation, they're looking for ESG, more sustainability type investments. So they're looking to match their investments to what their beliefs are. So
Mhm.
they want the ESG investments. They want things that when I first got into this industry 25 years ago, we would screen portfolios for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And now every single class has some kind of version of a sustainability or an environment investment process. And so it's actually really interesting to see that because they're again, this goes back to they're putting their money where their values are. Their purchases
Mhm.
are being made based on their values and not based on, kind of what their wants are.
Yeah, and I think ESG is obviously just like the buzzword, right? It's based,
Yes.
amongst advisors, but it's one of those buzzwords where it can kind of mean anything in a weird way. I've noticed where you'll find ESG lists where like some, I think most people like when people think of like the woke mob and that sort of stuff, they're really thinking of like the E and the S. But a
Yes.
lot of terms in terms of successful investments and things that are gonna sort of actually do well for you, it's the G that is sort of the capital letter involved in there. And ESG can sort of in many ways be molded to what your client wants it to mean. I've seen ESG lists of the best oil companies, which
Yes.
is like almost made my head explode, right? But it makes sense when you think of it's capital G, small es.
Well, and also, I think if oil companies are a great example where there are some oil companies that will advocate that they're trying to find more
Mhm.
sustainable energy sources. But the governance is a really big piece. We're also in a time where, and the millennials grew up in this time where they're more inclusive, they're more diverse, and they want to forward that progress. And so they are really doing a good job and holding all of our feet to the fire when it comes to that. And on the governance side, it is important. I work with a number of clients that really believe that their team needs to have diversity, that want to make sure that there's diversity within SEI, that wants to make sure that the people that are making decisions on behalf of the company that affects them does reflect the diversity and the inclusion that is necessary for that forward progress.
Yeah, and ultimately, we've come a very long way, I guess, since
Yes.
that sort of sin screening that you mentioned earlier. This idea of just like no tobacco companies. I mean, people still do that. That's still completely reasonable, but
Oh,
there's more.
definitely.
Like we mentioned with the oil companies, like as long as if you accept that that is a necessary evil in this world that's going to exist regardless, then you can pick the lesser of the evils, right? The one that's always trying to do the good, and feel okay about that decision, depending on what your values necessarily are.
Yeah, and to your point, in terms of the governance, like what does their board look like? What does their
Mhm.
senior leadership look like? Do they have underrepresented minorities on their board, or is it 90% 60-year-old white men?
Mhm.
So that's part of the whole governance piece, is making sure that that diversity is part of the company's ethos.
Mhm. So I think one of the more negative stereotypes about sort of millennials is that they care for causes, but it's sort of there's sort of a level of dilettantism where
Yes.
they just care about causes as opposed to cause that actually
Right.
matters to them. They just want to care about something. A, have you experienced that with the clients you work with, or is that just sort of hogwash? And B, I mean, how do you really get down to? I mean, if you have someone who's just like a cause head, how do you really boil down to like what the one they should really be putting their weight behind is?
So to answer the first question, no, I would say that I have not encountered that within my clients and
Mhm.
their families. I do think that they really do. They do put their money where their mouth is, and they really do believe, like, they're walking the walk.
Mhm.
So they truly believe in it. They want to make purchases based on their values and their decisions behind that. And so they aren't just cause heads. There are plenty of those people out there. We all know that. But most of the clients that I work with certainly are not. Because again, I think we mentioned this previously. I work with a lot of
Mhm.
first generational wealth creators, and their children, they saw their families grow, their families really grew up in that wealth creation. And so some of our families, the first generation, are saying, we work hard and we expect you to work hard so that you can do the fun things like giving back, so that you can make sure that you are giving to the charities or the organizations that mean something to you. And I think that a lot of them are also taking it a step further by saying, I'm going to choose my advisors, I'm going to choose my team based on what means something to me. I don't want to have an organization that does not believe in the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. I want to make sure that my team represents something that looks like me, or something that looks like the world that I want to create. So it's actually been really interesting to kind of see that genesis of clients over the past 2+ decades.
Yeah, it's really
And
interesting that you bring that up because I think we spend a lot of time on this show. Sorry to interrupt.
nope.
Talking about sort of multi-generational wealthy families and sort of how to successfully pass on, capital V values.
Mhm.
But this is sort of the other side of that coin, right? Where it's instead of struggling against affluenza and sort of how do we pass on these values to these kids who have never had to work a day in their life. Um, this is the other side where it's like, well, they've seen it. They've seen what it's like to work hard. They know, and so they're close enough to it to not have to have the values passed on. They have them. They've witnessed them. They've earned them themselves.
You would hope so. That's for sure. I I can't say that's always the case, but you
Uh,
certainly hope that is. But it's what we have seen, or what I have seen in my practice, is really that it's the communication that helps pass those values on. It's telling stories. It's this is the adversity that perhaps you don't remember, that we had to make a decision as a family that was really hard on us at the time. this is why we made it and this is what has come from it. And that's where you can really pass on those values.
Yeah.
That's where you're able to make children more comfortable with the wealth.
So this is a bit of an odd question, maybe, because this is a larger trend than this. But and since but where does the pandemic factor into all of this? I know the housing market went a little insane, and we're still sort of seeing it sort of flop all over the place, and just also just the trauma of the pandemic in general. I mean, what role has that played in changing or accelerating or decelerating? What have you seen that you feel like that's done to this trend?
Well, one of the things that I would say the millennials have done a really good job at as a whole since they entered the workforce. I am, straight in Gen X. We are the lost generation. We're the forgotten generation. But I look at what the millennials have done since I've entered the workforce and since they've gotten in as well. They want work-life balance. So the pandemic has probably accelerated that.
Yeah.
And I'd say that they did a great job advocating for it before. And because of the pandemic and because of their advocating, it's here to stay. The work-life balance is really important for people, and employers are recognizing that.
Yeah. It's all about that freedom, right? I mean,
Yes.
maintaining, caring about things beyond your immediate surroundings, whether that's, things other countries, travel, maintaining a small footprint so that you can
Yes.
actually do those things reasonably without having to worry about the massive undertaking you've left at home.
Right. And also when you get back to you also asked about real estate. When you get back to the whole real estate issue too, you're seeing a spread, where suburbia used to be within 20 minutes or a half hour, maybe even an hour of a major city. And because of that flexibility, because of the work-life balance that has been advocated for, and really you're seeing people they might work for a company that's based in New York and they live 5 hours away, 6 hours away, or it's more comfortable for them to find a place with more land that is a further commute. Like, it's not as much of a concern for them because they know either they can work remotely or they do work remotely.
Yeah, I mean, this is, as a New Yorker, this is something that I'm extremely acutely aware of, even on my own team. Funny, at the beginning of the pandemic, Barbados ran one of these, several countries did it, but they sort of wanted to drum up tourism. So they ran this sort of program to give temporary visas to young people to sort of, hey, come work from Barbados, come work here for a year and see if, hopefully they stay or whatever. And one of our reporters wanted to do that, and he was not allowed to because it was like, that's insane. What are you doing? You can't work in Barbados. By the end of the pandemic, in so many scare quotes, we had one of our editors had moved out to California. We hired someone from Indianapolis. It was just like over 2 years, it went from like, this is insane to like, oh yeah, who cares?
Yes, you can work from anywhere. It's been proven. I mean, we were literally shut in for months. I had not even a 2-year-old at the time home with me.
Oh, wow.
And I was working full time. Like there is that ability to do that. And companies recognize like our employees are going to do better work when we give them that opportunity.
So, I mean, in terms of real estate, then, does that make it seem like more of a foolish purchase, I guess, to buy something opulent in the city, or is it just there's more options as opposed to being one?
Yeah, I would say it gives you more options because you in New York City, perhaps you don't have to be, you still want to be in the city because that's what you thrive on, and you want to have that experience of living in a city. And you probably need more space than anything else. Like instead of if you're a solo practitioner, and you're single, no children, perhaps you need a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom plus a den, because you need just a little bit more space to actually give yourself that separation of work and state, so to speak, or home and work. I think I saw that a little bit. Certainly, I'm outside of the Philadelphia area, and people were moving to not necessarily in new neighborhoods, but they just said, I need a room for me, and I need a room for my spouse or my roommate or my partner. But we also need to have a little bit more space just so that I don't wake up and I see my computer. So I think it had kind of I think that's why we saw the real estate market really go through the roof. First because people could people didn't have to commute, so that time frame was no longer in their thought process. And then second, a lot of people needed more space because they did want that separation.
Mm-hmm. So one of the interesting things about Julia Fox specifically that she said, a lot of what we've been talking about is sort of generational values and those sorts of things. And it's more sort of, I'd rather do this than that. But she actually said that she's uncomfortable with excessive displays of wealth. That's a much more negative connotation rather than I would rather put this towards causes I care about,
Yes.
as opposed to I actively don't like this. What role does that play in any of this? And where does that maybe come from, as much as we can speculate about an entire generation of people?
You're right. Like, it is speculation, but I think some of it could come from guilt. I've seen that a lot in some of my families where, there's guilt around the wealth, because not because of where it came from, instead because there is so much excess wealth there that they feel as though they can do more for other people. Or they feel guilty because they have the ability to do a lot more than one of their neighbors or their friends do. And in Julia Fox, she grew up not wealthy.
Yeah.
So for her, she wants to transcribe her upbringing onto her son. I mean, she made a specific comment around that we don't need to repeat, but it was really interesting because you do hear that a lot from our clients, where I don't want to mess up my children. So, we have significant excess wealth that we're never going to spend and our children are never going to spend. So how do we make sure that we don't mess them up, that they are contributing members of society in some way? And it doesn't have to be about helping other people. Certainly, like, that's a great way to educate family members about family wealth. The way that I really look at it too is, you should look at your family as a business. And so you're not going to, if you have a succession plan in place, which most of our families do, their children are going to inherit their wealth. You still have to do all the training. You don't make the intern the next CEO.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? And you level set, you educate, you communicate, you tell stories. That's how you pass the values along. Julia Fox still probably flies private, even if she doesn't like she
doesn't show you the TikTok of that, though. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's great. Good for her. I mean, if she doesn't, good for her too. It's a personal choice. And I think, like, in terms of that, she gets to do with her wealth what she wants. She gets to do with her life what she wants. So I embrace her ideology. I embrace, like, her goal of raising her child in a world that's, it does not show the excess wealth that she has. But there are other people that want to enjoy the spoils of their labor. So again, good for them. I think it's all about expressing how you feel and allowing the family members, the friends, to also participate in that discussion.
And it's the advisor's job to get them to actually do that.
Yes. Yes,
in a way that's constructive and actually actionable.
Yes. This goes back to even our last conversation around, values in a family. That's a great way to actually talk to your children about the decisions that you've made and why you've made them, and to bring up, like, this is my value and this is how I live my value or my set of values. And it's our job to kind of make those conversations easier. It's our job to catalyze those conversations. Here at SEI, we like to say that we embrace a culture of conversation, and that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, I could probably just rename this podcast "Celebrity Communication," because it seems like every episode, our sort of message is just like, and after all that 20 minutes of talking, communicate with your clients. But it happens that way for a reason, because the only way you can get down to these deep values and the things that actually where you can add value to your client because actually know things about them and what they like and don't like is by talking to them, is by having an actual human relationship with them. Crazy.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. Like, there's no doubt about that, because you can't, I even think I'm not on the investment side. I was, a generation ago, but, even on the investment side, you can't really put together an asset allocation without knowing what a client's goals and objectives are.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good and well to say, like, here, check this box and we'll come up with, what your asset allocation should be based on numbers. That's not good planning. And that's not actually getting into the heart of your relationship with your client.
Yeah.
Getting into the heart of the relationship with your client is knowing, what are their fears about their children? What are your fears about your grandchildren? What are your fears about, what this wealth looks like? And it is based on conversations. It is based on communication. And it's our job to help through that and make it so it's not as emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to point out that that's not a new thing. What you just said,
No.
that was never good planning, even
No.
when it used to be, the predominant thing before, the march of the machines showed up and,
Yes.
and made people start thinking about the human aspect of things and forced people to actually do good planning. But it's, just because they're forced to actually engage with it now doesn't mean that was at some point considered good planning. This was always the better way to do it.
Yes, wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, right. It was, to your point, like, no, that was never a good idea. It was the easiest way to quantify the discussions that you were having with your clients,
Yes.
and show that you were doing what was in their best interest. And but no, it is, the more that you know your clients, the more that they feel comfortable talking to you about all of those things that we discussed, like that, those fears, the anxiety, the more good work that we can do as advisors.
Well, that's about all the time we have. I'd like to thank Kelley Wolfington for once again being an awesome guest and really taking us through some difficult topics, I think, to really quantify. Some of this stuff is hard to wrestle with because it can be so mushy depending on the clients. So thanks so much for coming on, Kelley.
David, thank you so much for having me on again. Certainly enjoyed the conversation.
And for all our listeners, I'll see you, or I guess you'll hear me, on the next episode of Celebrity Estates, Wills of the Rich and Famous.
Thank you for listening to the Celebrity Estates Wills of the Rich and Famous podcast. Click the subscribe button below to become notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WealthManagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.